Chapter 61. My son wakes up. Suddenly, Zhang Tinghao said, "It's not like that. Believe me, it was this woman who seduced me. She wanted to take advantage of your coma and take advantage of the family's assets. It's all her fault. Aunt had her marry you. I know that she isn't your type. The Sen family lost because they wanted to make use of our family and obtain benefits from us." Sen Shuang did not expect this person to be such a jerk. He was caught red-handed and even wanted to ruin her reputation. If she did not beat him until half of his body was paralyzed, she would not be able to handle all the anger within her. Zhang Hong's lips curled into a cold smile. His deep black eyes were cold and dense, exuding a sense of danger. He held the fruit knife to Zhang Tinghao's eye and smacked the palm of his hand. The sound was not loud, however, every time he did so, it shocked Zhang Tinghao. His face had long turned pale. Zhang Tinghao panicked. "Zhang Hong, no, brother, we're family. If you have something to say, we can talk it out. I'm really blameless here. It's all her fault. This woman is not sincere and hates that she married a vegetable." Sen Shuang listened to Zhang Tinghao's nonsense. She was angry, but she knew that Zhang Hong would not believe these things. Sure enough, Zhang Hong stood by the bed, looking down at him. His expression was calm, and the smile on his face was evil and dangerous. He loosened his grip on the fruit knife and used the blade to cut open Sen Shuang's bonds. The tip of the knife sank into the floor. The dull sound seemed to have affected Zhang Tinghao. All the hair on his body stood on end. He got off the floor and slowly made his way to the door. Zhang Hong said coldly, "Who told you to use the door?" The person who had gotten to the door stumbled and fell to the ground. He did not dare to take another step forward. Sen Shuang's limbs were freed, but her body was still weak. The dress she was wearing was also torn. She could only grab the blanket on the bed to cover herself. When she thought of Zhang Tinghao, who had looked at her just now, and the words that he had said, Sen Shuang felt that this person should be punished. Otherwise, she would feel indigent. "To call you so many times, why did it take you so long to finally wake up?" Although she was angry with Zhang Tinghao, she still harbored a grudge against Zhang Hong. How did he take his own sweet time? She could not forgive him so easily. She was not innately a kind person. Zhang Hong glanced at Zhang Tinghao helplessly. "If he didn't try to make you cheat on me, I would have slept peacefully for longer." The figure on the ground shrunk and got up again. He said nervously, "Brother, I drank too much and said nonsense. Don't take it to heart. Seeing that grandfather is old, finding out about this will definitely hurt him. Please, just let this go." The smile on Zhang Hong's lips became even more pronounced. Under Zhang Tinghao's frightened gaze, he smiled and said, "Okay, but I hate it the most when others touch my things." Zhang Tinghao almost fell to the ground again. "I will never touch your woman again. I won't touch your things." Just as he walked to the door, he thought of something and smiled fondly. "I won't use the door." Anyway, he had not used the door to come in. Now he was just going back the way he came. Seeing Zhang Tinghao running towards the balcony, Sen Shuang's eyes reddened unwillingly. Just as she was about to blame Zhang Hong, she saw a flash of silver light, followed by Zhang Tinghao's miserable scream. The fruit knife sank into Zhang Tinghao's thigh, and he instantly fell from the balcony. Sen Shuang watched him fall. Will he die from the fall? Zhang Hong pulled her from the door and helped her to the bed and said indifferently, "Second floor." It seemed like he would not die. What a pity. Sen Shuang looked at Zhang Hong. He did not look like a person she was familiar with. His cold aura exuded danger, and he drew others' attention to him. Was this still the gentle and easygoing Zhang Hong that she knew, or was he always like this? The sound of footsteps came from the outside the door. It sounded like there were quite a number of people. Sen Shuang did not have time to react before she was pulled into someone's arms. The two of them rolled onto the bed and wrapped themselves in a blanket. Zhang Hong pulled off her skirt and threw it to the ground. Then he turned over and laid on top of her, putting his weight on her. His movements were smooth and he did not hesitate. When he lowered his head and kissed Sun Shuang's lips, the door opened. Sun Shuang wanted to struggle, but Zhang Hong stopped her by putting his hand on her shoulder. When she felt his lips on her, Sun Shuang blushed and looked at the man on top of her. Under the blanket, her heart rate picked up the speed. Under the blanket, her heart rate picked up speed. Zhang Hong stood up and turned to look at the door. The few people standing outside the door immediately sucked in a sharp breath. Lan Yibai reacted. "Zhang Hong, you're awake!" When she saw that Zhang Hong could move, her eyes brightened, and she was so excited that she wanted to rush over. Fortunately, Zhang Xinyan was beside her, stopped her. Otherwise, she would have acted like an insensible mother-in-law. Chapter 62. About to have a grandson. Sun Shuang poked her head out from under the blanket, grabbed it, and whispered, "Mom, why did you guys come back so quickly?" After saying that, she shyly retracted into Zhang Hong's embrace. With how they looked now, and the torn dress on the floor, it was probably obvious what they were doing. Outside the door, Boyan was all smiles. His pair of cunning eyes swept across the room and landed on the glass door leading to the balcony that was open. He seemed to know exactly what was going on. "Aunt, Zhang Hong has just woken up. He shouldn't be meeting too many people right now. Let Sun Shuang take care of him. Let him rest well first." She was smiling slyly. Sun Shuang had already buried herself under the blanket because she knew that she was not wearing anything under the blanket. So many people had suddenly barged in. What else could she do if she did not hide in Zhang Hong's arms? Fortunately, Zhang Hong was very well behaved under the blanket. He had kept his palm on her shoulder, and he had not done anything excessive. Lan Yibai regained her senses and suddenly realized something. She let everyone out, and her smile was unmistakable. "Zhang Hong needs to rest well now. We don't want to disturb him. Let Sun Shuang take care of him." Her son had woken up. This was a huge surprise. When she had regained her senses, she realized that Zhang Hong and Sun Shuang were in bed together. It seemed that not only did she have a son, she would soon be able to have a grandson. Lan Yibai's entire body was trembling. She tugged on Zhang Xinyan, who was beside her, and said in an uncertain tone, "I'm not dreaming, right? Is he really awake?" She really wished that she could rush back into the room and take a closer look at her son. Zhang Hong had really woken up. This half a year of suffering grievances was worth it. She began to have hope in her life. Zhang Xinyan nodded and seemed a little bit sad. "Brother has woken up, Mom. You don't have to worry. You can go and see him tomorrow morning." She was naturally happy that her brother had woken up. However, she had brought Lan Yibai and the others here today to catch her cheating. She would not be held accountable later, right? She was not afraid of Sun Shuang. After all, she was a little girl who was younger than her. However, her brother was not easy to talk to. Although she knew that Zhang Hong might not necessarily like Sun Shuang upon waking up, Zhang Hong had never allowed others to touch his things since he was young. Plus, she was not on the same side as Sun Shuang. The more Zhang Xinyan thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. If her brother did not like Sun Shuang, then what were the two of them doing just now? It was over. If she said that she had gone to see Sun Shuang hitting on another man today and purposely brought her mother back to embarrass Sun Shuang, would Zhang Hong drag her down in a fit of anger? Lan Yibai turned to look at Boyan, who was falling behind them. "Little Yan, I'll have to trouble you about Zhang Hong." Boyan's expression had turned serious once more. He replied very seriously to Lan Yibai's words. He just woke up and his body is still very weak. He'll need to recuperate for a while before he can recover. His words reminded Lan Yibai of something. She immediately said nervously, "Then they were still fine in that aspect just now, right?" After Zhang Hong's accident, Lan Yibai had always regretted not letting him settle down earlier. If Zhang Hong really did not wake up this time, wouldn't the Zhang family have to cover for him? Now that Zhang Hong had woken up, she could also think about having a grandchild earlier. After all, now that she had a daughter-in-law, a grandchild would definitely be on the horizon. Boyan realized that Lan Yunbai was worried about and hurriedly said, "Don't worry, Aunt. He's very well. There won't be any effects in that aspect." Lan Yunbai nodded. Still worried, she urged, "After you check up on Zhang Hong tomorrow, check up on Sun Chuang as well. She's still young and I'm afraid her body won't be able to adapt. Should we give them some nurturing Chinese medicine to take for the few days?" No matter how indirect Lan Yunbai's words were, Boyan and Zhang Xinyan understood what she meant. They were both adults and had seen everything. There was no need to hide such things. Zhang Xinyan was not married yet. When she heard that her mother was in a hurry to get a grandson, she blushed in embarrassment. "Mom, Zhang Hong had just woken up, and his body is so weak. Why are you still thinking about such things?" Boyan was calm. "Zhang Hong has just woken up. I'm afraid that his body can't handle it right now. Take your time with such things. Little cousin-in-law can take care of him." This arrangement suited Lan Yunbai the most. She looked at Boyan and said kindly, "I'll leave the matters of the two of them to you. I'm not in a hurry. I'm sure they will get pregnant in 2 or 3 months." 2 to 3 months, and you still say you're not in a hurry? If you were in a hurry, how soon would you expect a pregnancy? Boyan's smile seemed stuck onto his face. He looked at Lan Yunbai and said, "The matter of getting pregnant also depends on their fate." He had begun to sympathize with Zhang Hong. Before the car accident, he had been like a working machine. He did not have the luxury of resting in bed for a few months. When he woke up, he was to become a childbearing machine. Lan Yunbai frowned. "Do you think they're not fated to be together? Zhang Hong seems to like Sun Chuang and has married into the Zhang family. I think fate is on their side." Chapter 63. Who would dare to stop her from carrying a grandson? Zhang Xinyan bit her lip. "Doesn't my brother still have a fiancé? What if Yi finds out that my brother is awake and changes her mind?" Lan Yunbai turned around and glared at Zhang Xinyan. She said in a low voice, "Go tell your grandfather that your brother is awake." "What Yi? Her daughter-in-law is now Sun Chuang. What does it have to do with her whether she changed her mind or not? Sun Chuang would be pregnant with her son's child within 3 months. She would not let anyone interfere with this." Seeing that everyone had left the room, Sun Chuang heaved a sigh of relief. However, she did not have the strength to do much else. She could only glare at Zhang Hong, who was still on top of her. Zhang Hong leaned against the bed and closed his eyes. He seemed to have used up all his strength. "There's no need to look at me with such admiration. As your husband, it's only right that I protect your reputation." It had to be said that in order to stop Zhang Tinghao just now, he had to force himself to get out of the bed. Now his entire leg was trembling from overexertion. Sun Chuang raised her head, full of anger. What did he mean by protecting her reputation? Zhang Hong's kiss just now had clearly ruined her reputation. She was not naive. Everyone else thought the two of them were. She was really embarrassed and angry. She was clearly still an innocent girl, yet he had forcefully labeled her as a married woman. Sun Chuang was still angry, and the angrier she got, the more aggrieved she felt. "You were already okay in the morning. Why didn't you get up earlier?" Zhang Tinghao, who had been hiding in the room waiting for her to come back, so the lights in the room were all switched off. Zhang Hong had stayed in the room. He knew that Zhang Tinghao had come in, but let him wait behind the door to attack her. Zhang Hong had not stopped him. Zhang Hong explained, "I don't know either. He sneaked in because he was coming for you." Zhang Tinghao did not make much noise. He had already deliberately hidden outside. He had thought that this girl would not come back so early. At that time, he had really fallen asleep. However, it was obvious that Sun Chuang did not believe such a reason. To put it bluntly, she was not that important to him. He could let Zhang Tinghao bully her. If she had really been taken advantage of tonight, she would have definitely turned around and killed the both of them. She would make sure that the Zhang family would never have any descendants. Zhang Hong did not know that Sun Shuang was thinking. However, he was completely exhausted at that moment. It was indeed very difficult for him to stand up now. Sun Shuang bit her lip and looked at Zhang Hong. Good throw. Sun Shuang took note of how he did not seem to care about her. She felt even more wronged. Normally, shouldn't a husband comfort his wife when she was at a disadvantage? However, Zhang Hong did not. He was not willing to look at her. It seemed that she had overestimated herself. She had taken care of him for a few months, and he had ignored her just like that. Zhang Hong turned his back to her and said, I used to play darts all the time, so I'm a little rusty now. Otherwise, he would have not cut Zhang Tinghao's thigh. Sun Shuang looked at the tall figure, and the grievances and bitterness in her heart rushed into her eyes. Before she could say anything, she heard Zhang Hong's voice from behind her. Cover yourself with the blanket. Although she was complaining internally, Sun Shuang still held onto the blanket tightly. Although she felt wronged, if Zhang Hong was really someone like Zhang Tinghao, she would feel worse right now. Sun Shuang turned her back and looked at the open glass window of the balcony. She felt the wind rushing in, and suddenly she felt the sorrow in her heart make itself known in the quiet room. Faint sobs echoed through the space. The blanket was also moved in time with her sobs. The night was dark, and the lights in the room were turned off. She felt arms encircle her. He wrapped his arms around the blanket and the person under it. You're crying. Zhang Hong's voice reverberated in the dark night. The blanket in his arms suddenly moved and became quiet. Zhang Hong was not in a hurry. He only sighed slightly. You're planning to suffocate yourself in the blanket. Sun Shuang's muffled voice came from under the blanket. Your family is no good at all. In the darkness, the corner of Zhang Hong's mouth curled into a smile. So you're homesick? He remembered that when he was unconscious, Sun Shuang would always think of the Sin family. She told him a lot of the things about her childhood. Although he felt that this girl was really nagging him to death at the time, thinking about it now made his heart feel warm. What's the use of me missing my family? The Sun family is gone, and that's why you guys are bullying me like this. It's so pitiful to be a woman from my family. As Sun Shuang spoke, she felt that she was indeed pitiful and had nothing at all. She had even married her husband without loving him first. Although her mother-in-law treated her well, she always felt that she was beautiful and unreliable. Her only sister-in-law still did not like her. The most hateful thing was that in the Zhang family had a brother who stared at her with lecherous eyes. No matter how she thought about it, she felt that she had lost out, so she cried even more miserably. Chapter 64. The Enviable Sun Shuang. It was difficult for Zhang Hong to ignore her this time. He could only turn on the bedside lamp and pull her out of the blanket. Sure enough, after a while, her eyes were red with tears. Zhang Hong wrapped her up in a blanket and asked patiently, Do you have your strength back? Sun Shuang sobbed twice and said unwillingly, No. It seemed that Zhang Tinghao was afraid that Sun Shuang would fight him off this time too, so he did not go easy on her. It was obvious that the effect of the drug he had used was far too strong. Zhang Hong let her lean against his chest and said solemnly, I didn't mean to get up late just now. Although he explained himself, she obviously did not believe him. It's okay, nothing happened to me anyway. As long as your dignity remains, don't mind me. You didn't know about our marriage anyway, so if you don't care about me, I won't be angry with you. Her words were generous, but Zhang Hong was not stupid. It was obvious that she did not mean what she had said. If a woman really pointed out your weaknesses, you had no strength left. He understood her dissatisfaction. Zhang Hong could only soften his voice and comfort her. If you're not angry, then don't cry. You don't look good if your eyes are swollen from crying. Sun Shuang resisted. Whether I look good or not has nothing to do with you. Although she protested, Sun Shuang still wiped away the tears from her face. She thought of having a facial mask done tomorrow, so that she could revive her skin. After all, it was not worth it to hurt herself for such a heartless man. Zhang Hong saw that she was in a better mood, so he said helplessly, You married me, and you are Mrs. Zhang. Of course, whether or not you look good or happy is my business. Sun Shuang replied, then you like my face. As expected, men were shallow. This world was all about appearances. Zhang Hong realized that his words of comfort to Sun Shuang were being misunderstood. He did not expect this girl to be so difficult to comfort, so he was a little frustrated, and he laughed. He hugged her into his arms and gently comforted her. What's wrong with liking your face? Aren't you very beautiful? Shuang Shuang? Sun Shuang pushed Zhang Hong away and realized that she was actually recovered a little of her strength. After all, even if she was weak, it still made her feel a little better. He looked very scary just now. Her eyes were red as she spoke the truth. Thinking of the moment when Zhang Hong stood arrogantly in front of her, her heart trembled. She did not know if it was because she did not care about the past, but it turned out that when he stood, Zhang Hong was very tall and the aura he exuded was very potent. He could not be underestimated. Although his face was a little pale and his entire frame was rather thin, Zhang Tinghao acted truly afraid that Zhang Hong would act menacingly just now. It should not be just because Zhang Hong would allow the entire Zhang family to expand several times in a few years and become the richest business empire in Lin City. Zhang Hong said, really? Then I won't scare you next time. Sun Shuang pouted. When he stabbed Zhang Tinghao with that knife, it was very satisfying. Thinking about how Zhang Tinghao had fallen off the balcony, if it were not for the fact that she was completely powerless, she would have wanted to see what kind of pathetic state he would be in. It would be the best if all of his arms and legs were broken. Zhang Hong hugged her. He won't make you angry anymore. I'm here. Sun Shuang sniffled and steadied herself. Inside, she already felt much more comfortable. Sure enough, she wanted to vent her emotions, otherwise she'd feel uncomfortable from holding it in. Zhang Hong, you're so nice. You're just like my father. Zhang Hong, who was sitting on top of her, furrowed his brows tightly. A deep look flashed across his eyes. He did not want to be like her father. The news of Zhang Hong waking up caused a storm in Lin City. Some people who were fawning over Zhang Yalian and his son began to think that the huge business empire was about to change. At Zhang Xinyan's welcoming reception, old Master Zhang had just announced in front of everyone that the daughter of the Zhang family would inherit 5% of the shares of the Zhang Corporation. This was originally a reminder and a slap to the Zhang family's second son. Now, after one night, the entire Zhang family had changed. Zhang Hong, who had been lying in bed for half a year, had suddenly woken up. A vegetable had instantly become the center of attention in Lin City. The Zhang family's young madam, Sun Shuang, who had just been introduced that night, had also been pushed into the center of the attention. She had become the envy of many solicitors. Last night she had been mocked for marrying a vegetable, although she was once the number one solicitor in Lin City. The news of Zhang's family's young master waking up the next morning was slapped to the face of the people who mocked her. Forget that. Sun Shuang was the object of their jealousy now. She was lucky that even a vegetable could bring her back to life. Old Master Zhang entered the Zhang Hong's room early in the morning. Sun Shuang was dressed neatly like an obedient little wife. She stood by the bed obediently and served tea and water to everyone. The more she lowered her head and looked good, the more people felt that she was obedient and adorable. Lan Yabai refused to let go of Zhang Hong's hand for a moment. She was afraid that she was dreaming. Last night, she was so excited that she did not sleep at all. Seeing that her son could speak and act considerate in front of her, her eyes could not help but turn red. Chapter 65. Saving Zhang Hong from Trouble. Lan Yubai's eyes were red as she said, I knew that what Xin Yan said was right. You woke up after all. You can't bear to leave us. You will definitely get better. Zhang Xinyan went forward with Lan Yubai. Although she had been trying to comfort Lan Yubai, her eyes were also red. Brother, you scared me and Mom to death. If she did not have a studio overseas, she would have planned to stay by Lan Yabai's side and take care of Zhang Hong with her. Thankfully, he had finally woken up. The old man was probably the most emotional person present. Although he did not appear to be overly emotional when he heard of Zhang Hong's improvement, his trembling hands still revealed his excitement. "It's good that you're awake. Take good care of your body. There's no need to worry about the company's matters first. I can still take care of it for now. You'll still have time to do so when you're rested." He could finally hand over the Zhang Corporation with his mind at ease. As the rest of the house, apart from the Zhang family's second son, everyone else could not hide their joy. However, Sun Shuang still noticed that Zhang Tinghao did not show up today. She thought of how he had fallen from the balcony last night. She pretended to be curious and asked, "Why is Zhang Tinghao here? Is he busy with the company's matters?" "Your father is already here. If you don't dare to come, you're clearly playing with fire." Zhang Yeliang and Li Yan's stiff expressions became even more unsightly. Li Yan clutched the expensive handbag she was holding. Feeling wrong, she said, "Dad, last night, Tang Kao was busy with Xin Yan's party and fell down the stairs. Not only did he hit his head, but he also broke his arm and a leg. However, he cares about his younger brother and sister-in-law so much." When he found that Zhang Hong had woken up, he didn't care there was no one around to take care of him and insisted that I come over to see Zhang Hong. Lian was crying, looking like a blossom in the rain. She looked as if she had been wronged. Sun Shuang looked at her and pursed her lips. Did she think that the old man was her husband? Why was she crying like that? Was she afraid that others would not be able to tell what kind of person her son was? The old man's expression was not as menacing as she had thought it would be. However, when he looked at his second wife, his eyes revealed his displeasure. If anyone was to blame, it should be him. Although they were estranged for a short while, when Zhang Yelian and his second son was brought back into the family, he was only in his early 20s. But he was already married and had children. It was a pity that his grandson, who had grown up in the Zhang family all his life, failed to measure up. The old master said, "It's good that he didn't come, so as to avoid causing trouble over Zhang Hong." The old man's words made the second wife and husband's expression turn sour. Zhang Yelian wanted to explain. However, the moment that he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by the old master. "Since Zhang Hong is awake, you should tidy up the projects that he was originally in charge of and wait for Zhang Hong to recover. Once he does, they can be returned to him." Zhang Yelian's expression was extremely sour now. When Zhang Hong was lying on bed, he had worked hard to manage the Zhang family. He did not expect his authority and possessions to be handed over to Zhang Hong just like that. How could the old master say such a thing so easily? Zhang Yeliang's face was cold, and he did not say a word. Lan Yabai, who was standing off to the side, watched this unfold and smiled. "Dad, Zhang Hong's body has not recovered yet. Since the company's matters have been delayed, let him put it aside for now. I want him and Sun Shuang to have a child and help grow the Zhang family." Sun Shuang's hands trembled, and the cup of water she had held followed suit. Her face was pale. She did not expect her pregnancy would be discussed so early. Lan Yabai's reminder made old Master Zhang smile. He had more or less heard about what happened after Zhang Hong woke up last night. After the car accident, his heart was filled with worry. If Zhang Hong had married and had children earlier, perhaps the entire Zhang family would not have been wiped out by this car accident. Sun Shuang pursed her lips. Her face flushed and said, "Mom, he just woke up and needs to rest well. There's no need to rush child, right?" Zhang Hong had just woken up, and they were already thinking of continuing the family line. Sun Shuang could only imagine how complicated it would be to have a child in the Zhang family. When she agreed to marry Zhang Hong back then, she was extremely glad that her husband was a vegetable. There was no need to worry about her mother-in-law making her have children. Only now did she realize that she had really thought too highly of this arrangement. Not only did she have to fight with her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, she also had to courageously fight with all sorts of relatives. What was more frightening was that she had to give birth to a child. The key that was she and Zhang Hong had never done such a thing before. How could they have a child? Lan Bai could not help but sob. I know that you young people are not in a hurry, but we old people are. Something has happened to Zhang Hong, and now just thinking about it makes me really scared. Sun Shuang, you have to be considerate. Earlier it was Zhang Hong. Beside her, Li Yan and Zhang Xinyan could not help but advise her. Sister-in-law, don't be anxious. Aren't Sun Shuang and Zhang Hong still young? Look at how old Cheng Hao is. He doesn't even have a wife. At the very least, you still have a daughter-in-law. Even though that was the case, Li Yan could not help but argue with them internally. How could she have forgotten that wealth was not everything in this family? Children were the foundation of the family. Chapter 66. Massage Yourself. Lan Bai was one step ahead of her. Now that Zhang Hong had woken up, if Sun Shuang was pregnant with another grandchild, the old man would hand over all of the Zhang family's assets to them. At that time, the two of them would have no chance of survival. Li Yan's heart sank at the thought. It seemed that she had to quickly make her son get married and have children. Lan Bai looked at Sun Shuang with reddened eyes. The anticipation in her eyes were not concealed at all. Sun Shuang, what do you think? Sun Shuang was instantly stunned. Only now did she know what it was like to be forced to give birth. In the past, people had the internet had said that she did not feel anything. Moreover, getting married was easy. When she got married, she had not been forced. However, being forced to have children was something new. The pressure made her chest feel unusually tight. Sun Shuang looked at Zhang Hong and furrowed her brows slightly. At this moment, as her husband, shouldn't he say something? Without waiting for Sun Shuang to reply, Old Master Zhang spoke first. The girl is still young, so there's no need to hurry. Although he said that there was no hurry, there was disappointment in his eyes. Sun Shuang saw it clearly, and her chest tightened. She was afraid that she had hurt those old folks. Zhang Hong said, Grandfather, Mother, Shuang likes children very much, and we want to have a child too. It's just that I've just woken up, and she's worried that I won't be able to do it. There was a hidden meaning in Zhang Hong's words. Sun Shuang blushed at his words. When had she ever said that she liked children? Zhang Hong, don't paint me that way, all right? Lan Bai came back to her senses and said, take care of your body first. Your body is the most important thing. Shuang takes care of you every day. Now that you're awake, Shuang won't have to work so hard anymore. It's a good opportunity for Boyan to give the two of you some supplements. Sun Shuang had heaved a sigh of relief when Lan Bai's next words frightened her. No matter what, she still wanted her to give birth. Sun Shuang's face was crossed. It was indescribably ugly, and she still had to force a smile in front of everyone. After they left, she sat on the bed in a huff and bit her lip. I won't give birth. Zhang Hong rubbed his forehead. He had comforted her for the entire night and did not get good rest to begin with. He had also dealt with so many people just now, so his brain was already swollen and aching. When he heard that Sun Shuang did not want to give birth, he did not feel that it was strange. He only said, Mom did not say that you should give birth immediately. She was just saying that. Besides, how can you give birth alone? Now that he could not even stand up in this state, how could he have the strength to give her pregnant? Sun Shuang turned and glared at Zhang Hong angrily. He should not think that she did not understand the underlying meanings of his words just because she was young. Didn't he just say that he did not like her? and did not want to give birth to a child with her. Him not liking her did not matter much since she was already Mrs. Zhang. Him liking her was useless too because she did not want to give children at all. Zhang Hong did not expect that in such a short period of time. She would only actually be able to think of all sorts of things. Seeing Sun Chuang glare at him, he waved his hand at her and said, "My legs hurt. Help me massage it." It was probably because he had exerted himself too much last night and hurt his tendons. He was still not feeling well. When Boying came over, Lan Yabai had expressed her concerns about Zhang Hong. However, she could only let Sun Chuang take care of him. However, Sun Chuang did not feel sorry for him. Instead, she glared at him even harder. "You deserve it for being so caring. What does it have to do with me? If you want a massage yourself." Sun Chuang grabbed a pillow and smacked him with it. She turned around and left the room, leaving him there without caring about anything. In the studio, Sun Chuang complained to Mu Sen about her mother-in-law forcing her to get pregnant. After Mu Sen heard that, she could not help but look at her stomach. Mu Sen teased, "Then when do you and Zhang Hong plan to give birth?" Sun Chuang frowned and she could not help but blush. "Stop talking nonsense. There's nothing between us." Chapter 67. Mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws are natural enemies. Sun Chuang suddenly thought, "Why haven't I seen Senior Li around recently?" Li Jun seemed to have disappeared into thin air, or he had deliberately avoided her for the past few days. Whenever she was on campus, Sun Chuang would not see him. Even if she saw him in the corridor, he would walk away from her with a look of indifference. Mu Sen sighed. "After you guys finished the posters and the school bus drawing, I didn't see him around either. I heard that he has switched from art to fencing. He was so classy and refined, but he had chosen to give up on art and go for martial arts." Sun Chuang was also surprised. She did not expect Li Jun to like physical activities, such as martial arts. She had thought that a boy like him would only like to draw and play the piano. Mu Sen thought, "Could it be that the school's anniversary is coming up next month? I know this because I have to perform at the school's anniversary event." Sun Chuang nodded silently. She had thought it could be the case. After Zhang Hong woke up, his body did not recover very quickly. Instead, he seemed particularly weak. He even caught a cold. Sun Chuang took care of him and stayed by his side every day. Naturally, she got blamed for his illness. When Lan Yabai asked her to close the window at night, Sun Chuang already felt that her mother-in-law was blaming her. She opened the glass door on the balcony at night and had caused Zhang Hong to fall sick. When she handed the medicine to Zhang Hong, Sun Chuang's attitude was especially angry. "Mom told you to take the medicine." Zhang Hong took the cold medicine and met her glare. Immediately, he had an inexplicable expression. "You're angry when I'm sick. What logic is that?" Even he himself found it funny and could not help but laugh when he looked at Sun Chuang. Sun Chuang looked a little stifled by his question. She snorted coldly and said, "Angry? I'm not angry. Your mother told me to close the window at night, as if I'm the one who made you catch a cold. Who do you blame for your cold?" She was curious. Was Zhang Hong sick? His body was already weak. Why would he have to take a cold shower for no reason? Now that he was better, it was fine if he caught a cold. However, her mother-in-law would blame her for not taking good care of him. Zhang Hong looked at her aggressive she seemed. He held back his laughter and said, "I blame me." Sun Chuang pouted her little face and said, "It's all your fault. Why should I close the window?" Zhang Hong said helplessly, "Mom was just advising you out of kindness." Sun Chuang was furious that no one believed her. "Don't lie to me. She just thinks that I'm not as meticulous in taking care of you as she is. She even thinks I'm unreliable. To put it bluntly, she doesn't trust me." Zhang Hong was helpless. Are mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws really natural enemies? He did not really believe this statement in the past, but now he did. Sun Chuang and Lan Yabai were at odds with each other. After he woke up, it became even more obvious. Sun Chuang snorted. "Who said they were natural enemies? I'm not such a narrow-minded woman." Zhang Hong's voice came from behind her, and she could hear the slight smile in his voice. Yes, Mrs. Zhang, you're generous indeed. Sun Chuan quickly turned her head to look at him suspiciously. Why do I feel that you're making fun of me? She was very sensitive about this. Zheng Hong raised his eyebrows. No, it's just the truth. Sun Chuan looked at the man in front of her who was focusing his attention on the computer screen. What are you thinking? Zheng Hong replied without raising his head. I'm thinking from the bottom of my heart. Sun Chuan said, who knows what you're thinking of from the bottom of your heart? Sun Chuan's understanding of Zheng Hong was only limited to two things. He often spoke very casually, and when she was angry, he would patiently comfort her. He looked gentle and refined, but she had heard before that the Zheng Hong in the business world was different. He was ruthless and merciless, a ruler of the business empire who would never show any mercy to anyone. Sun Chuan did not know if the person she knew and the person she heard of were the same person. However, she was not afraid of the current Zheng Hong, aside from the ruthless version of him that had stabbed Zhang Tinghao that night. Zheng Hong suddenly looked up. It's not easy to understand. Touch it yourself and you might understand. Before Sun Chuan could react, he grabbed her wrist and pressed her palm against his chest. The sound of his heart beating shook her palm. The man's deep black eyes turned darker under the light. He asked in a hoarse voice, can you feel it? Sun Chuan saw the seriousness in his eyes. She pulled her hand back in a panic and said with a red face, it's beating so fast. Sun Chuan did not know whether she was talking about his heartbeat or her own. Zheng Hong continued, do you believe what I said to you? If you can't feel it clearly, I don't suggest you listen carefully again. After Zheng Hong finished speaking, he was about to go up and hug her. Sun Chuan was so frightened that she hurriedly got off the bed and grabbed a towel with a vigilant expression. Chapter 68. It turned out that she had caught her cheating that day. She looked at the serious man on the bed with a puffed-up face. After a while, she threw the towel into Zheng Hong's arms and said coquettishly, you old hooligan. Of course, she knew that Zheng Hong was teasing her, even at a young age. He took the advantage to touch and hug her, and even flirted with her with ill intentions. Indeed, the 30-year-old man was old-fashioned. He had already flirted with countless beautiful women. Now, he still wanted to get his hands on her. Did he think she was shallow enough to fall for him? Zheng Hong was baffled at her scolding. He had clearly said that he was so affectionate. How was he a hooligan in her eyes? Moreover, was there anything wrong with acting like a hooligan with his wife? The Zhang family's villa, which was shrouded in darkness of night, was filled with peace and tranquility. Sun Chuan sat in the rose room, hugging the latest CEO novel. She refused to return to her room for a long time. When she thought of the words that Zheng Hong had said to her, she could not help but blush. Now she would rather die than return to the room to face the man. Sun Chuan did not know when Zhang Xinyan came to stand in front of the open window. She looked at Sun Chuan with a hint of disgust. What are you doing here? My brother is awake. Your good days are here. You should be very pleased now. The Zhang family's assets will be in your hands very soon. Although her brother was awake now, she always felt that beautiful women would not behave themselves, especially a down-and-out daughter like Sun Chuan. In the past, she had always been surrounded by backup people. Now, why should she so willingly to take care of her bedridden brother? Her reasoning for marrying into the Zhang family was very simple in Zhang Xinyan's eyes. It was the Zhang family's property. Back then, Sun Chuan must have thought that her brother would not be able to live for long like that. When the time came, she would be able to obtain a lot of the Zhang family's property. Sun Chuan sat on the recliner and turned her dark eyes to look at Zhang Xinyan. Madam, do you have a problem with me? She kept feeling that Zhang Xinyan seemed to dislike her from the moment they met. In truth, Zhang Xinyan really did not like her. Zhang Xinyan said proudly, "Who do you think has the animosity towards you? You must be paranoid. Our family treats you so well because we want you to take care of my brother." Sun Shuang said very seriously, I have to take care of him. However, Zhang Hong always took advantage of her when she was not paying attention. A little girl like her was not as shameless as those old men. Even though she was very embarrassed when Zhang Hong flirted with her, thinking back on it now, she could not help but feel bashful. Plus, her heart was beating wildly. Zhang Xinyan said coldly, You think you can lie to everyone in the Zhang family, but you can't lie to me. That day I saw you hug a man and ran into this very greenhouse with him. We all know what a man and woman do when they're alone with each other. I just wanted to see if my brother would be angry about it when he woke up. When he finds out your true colors. I want to watch him kick you out of the Zhang family. Listening to Zhang Xinyan's words, Sun Shuang thought about how she had been dragged into the greenhouse by Yang Jinyan during the banquet. She was afraid that she had seen them. That must have been why they had coincidentally appeared in her bedroom that night. Therefore, it was not because Zhang Hong had woken up. They were concerned about Zhang Hong. Those people were clearly here to catch her committing adultery. If Zhang Hong had not woken up and interrupted everything, it was likely that Zhang Tinghao would have been in the room at the same time. They would have searched the room thoroughly, too. Sun Shuang was actually glad that Zhang Hong had stripped her of her clothes that day and dragged her into the bed. If seeing them in bed had not dispelled their worries, she would have become the target of suspicion for cheating, even if they had not found her secret boyfriend. Sun Shuang looked at her. Her pair of crafty eyes were filled with shrewdness. I did not expect to get so lucky. I have a considerate sister-in-law. Then, when do you want Zhang Hong to kick me out of the Zhang family? What if he doesn't believe you? Zhang Xinyan smiled coldly and proudly waved the phone in her hand. Do you think I can accuse you without evidence? I even took a photo of you hugging a man that night. Sun Shuang took a look at the photo that Zhang Xinyan was holding. The smile on her face instantly turned cold, and she said lazily, If you say that the person in the photo is me, does that make it true? Why would you do it to me if I refused to admit it? Zhang Xinyan angrily opened her phone and found the photo from that day. She stepped towards Sun Shuang with a proud expression. You don't dare to admit that the person in the photo is you, am I right? If this isn't you, then who is it? Sun Shuang took a look and could not help but frown. As expected, Zhang Xinyan had a good phone. The sky was so dark, and she had taken the photo from so far away. Even though she had zoomed in, she could still see it clearly. Even though she and Yang Jinyan were not hugging each other, it was true that Yang Jinyan was holding her hand, and she happened to be reminiscing while looking back at him. The two of them were looking at each other lovingly. It was such an ambiguous and misleading photo. Chapter 69. I will definitely make sure you and my brother get a divorce. The person who took this photo was so skilled that even Sun Shuang could not help but admire her. She must have studied photograph beforehand and in order to take such a good photo, right? Sun Shuang frowned and said, Is this me? It doesn't look like me. I can't deny it. Zhang Xinyan was so angry she leaned in closer. She raised her phone and could not help but glare at Sun Shuang. She wanted to see if the person in the photo was really her. What do you mean it's not? It doesn't look like you. This is clearly you. Look, this is the dress you wore at the party that night. Sun Shuang followed suit and leaned forward to get a closer look. She stared at the screen and said, Our dresses could have been similar. That's not unusual. Zhang Xinyan was furious. You're talking nonsense. This is a limited edition dress. There's only one dress like this in all of Lin City. Don't even think about denying it. This is you. Sun Shuang raised her head and asked, Who is that man? Zhang Xinyan was stunned by the question and said angrily, How would I know? He's definitely your boyfriend. Sun Shuang nodded in understanding. What you said seems to be right. Hearing that Sun Shuang had personally admitted it, Zhang Xinyan was instantly satisfied. She smiled and said, There's nothing wrong in the first place. It's just that you and your boyfriend went behind my brother's back. She was quite willing to make her brother into a cuckold. Did they think that she would definitely cheat on him? Sun Shuang nodded. We just met up. What can you do? Use this to get your brother to divorce me? Zhang Xinyan did not expect Sun Shuang to be so shameless. She shook her phone angrily and said, "This is evidence. My brother has many tricks up his sleeves. He will definitely not let you get away with this." Even if she did not divorce him, she would not let her take advantage of the Zhang family. Just as Zhang Xinyan was thinking about it, Sun Shuang's mouth suddenly broke into a dazzling smile. Her smile caught her gaze, and when they did, it became even more dazzling. Zhang Xinyan was actually shocked by this bright and beautiful woman in front of her. Even though she was a woman, she could admit that Sun Shuang's smile was really beautiful. Sun Shuang took advantage of her momentary gaze. The grape she was holding flew forward and hit Zhang Xinyan's arm. Her grip loosened and her phone fell into a bucket of water. Then Sun Shuang's fake cry of surprise rang out. "Oh my god, the evidence is gone!" Zhang Xinyan looked at her empty palm in shock. Her arm felt a little numb. She did not even realize that she had loosened her grip. Her phone had already sunk to the bottom of the bucket. Zhang Xinyan looked at Sun Shuang, who was gloating over her misfortune. "You'll pay for my phone." It must be this woman's doing. But why did her phone fall into the bucket? Sun Shuang did not touch her at all. Even if she wanted to frame Sun Shuang, there was no evidence now. There were only the two of them here. Zhang Xinyan could not believe that her hand slipped and that her phone fell into the bucket. She was angry and anxious. However, when she pulled her phone out of the bucket, it was no longer could be turned on. Sun Shuang sighed regretfully. "The phone looks pretty new." Zhang Xinyan stomped her feet in anger. "Of course, I just bought it last month." She was not worried about the phone. She was worried about the evidence in the phone. Sun Shuang had acted so shamelessly, and now she couldn't wait to be able to kick her out of the Zhang family. Moreover, if Sun Shuang told Zhang Hong what happened, he might end up scolding her. She knew very well what kind of person her brother was. Although he would not protect Sun Shuang wholeheartedly, he was definitely not someone who would allow her to spout nonsense. Sun Shuang raised her eyebrows and said, "You didn't manage to hold your phone properly and it fell into the water. You can't expect me to compensate you for that, right? You were holding the phone and I didn't even touch you. Moreover, I didn't even touch your phone either. It fell into the bucket and you're blaming me? You're too unreasonable. You can't say that your surname is Zhang and that you're my sister-in-law. You think you can bully me just because I have a different surname? No matter what, I'm still the Zhang family's daughter-in-law now. I have to show respect to the Zhang family's elders. Moreover, you should call me sister-in-law. You can't bully me just because you want to." Sun Shuang's words were filled with injustice, and her face inspired pity. Zhang Xinyan actually felt a level of bitterness that she could not explain. "You're talking nonsense. You're being unreasonable." Her phone was broken. How did this become her fault in the end? Sun Shuang was really too evil. Zhang Xinyan stomped her feet in anger, but she had no way of dealing with Sun Shuang. In the end, she could only leave a threatening sentence. "Just you wait. I will definitely find evidence of your adultery and get my brother to divorce you." She would not let such a wicked woman stay her sister-in-law. Sun Shuang looked at Zhang Xinyan's back as she walked off in a huff. "Didn't think you're smarter than me just because you're a few years older than me. When I was innocent and pure girl, you were already an unruly young lady." Chapter 70. You've already seen it. Why are you still so shy? Zhang Xinyan felt that Sun Shuang had provoked her. She went to look for Lan Yabai. She thought that her biological mother would side with her. Unexpectedly, Lan Yabai frowned and looked at her angrily. "Who told you to ambush Sun Shuang with photos?" Now that her son had just woken up, the two of them were on good terms. Soon she would be able to have a grandchild. Was it Zhang Xinyan deliberately trying to ruin her son's marriage? Lan Yabai disapproved of Zhang Xinyan's action. In the past, her speculations were valid only because Zhang Hong was only lying in bed and could not do anything. Sun Shuang was too beautiful, and her personality was also attractive to other men. She was afraid that if Zhang Hong continued like this, the Zhang family would not be able to keep her. However, things were different now. Her son had woken up, and her son was not a fool. Did Sun Shuang have another man? She believed that her son would know if Sun Shuang had wronged him in some way. If it was true, he would have probably said that they were getting a divorce the moment he woke up. However, Zhang Hong did not. He did not mention anything about the arranged marriage. He even got along well with Sun Shuang. That meant that her son liked Sun Shuang. Since the two of them were on good terms, having a grandson was possible. Who would allow others to interfere? She would not let her own daughter interfere either. Zhang Xinyan pouted aggrievedly. Mom, I know I was wrong. In the future, if I have evidence, I will hide it first and not let Sun Shuang know. When the time comes, I will give it to Zhang Hong and ask him to divorce her immediately. When Lan Yibai heard this, she could not help but roll her eyes at her. Are you out of your mind? Your brother likes Sun Shuang so much. How could he divorce her? In the future, don't bring up Sun Shuang with me. Also, call her sister-in-law. Zhang Xinyan did not expect that. Not only did she not get Lan Yibai's support, but she was also lectured by Lan Yibai. She really doubted if the person in front of her was her real mother. Why was her daughter-in-law even closer to her than her own daughter? This Sun Shuang really knew how to steal people's hearts. Sun Shuang tossed and turned in the greenhouse until it was dark. Only then did she slowly return to her bedroom. It was already late autumn, and there was no heating in the greenhouse. Once it was dark, it was exceptionally cold. Even the CEO novels that made her blush, made her heart race, could not keep her warm. In the room, the big bed was empty. Zhang Hong's computer was on the bed. There was a faint sound of running water coming from the bathroom next to it. Zhang Hong was actually taking a shower. Thinking of those 8-pack abs, Sun Shuang's face turned red in disappointment. You have to calm down. You are still young and have not dated. Zhang Hong is already 30 years old and has met many women. You can't be bewitched by him. Being with him is not worth it. Sun Shuang ran to the balcony and let the wind blow through her hair. She calmed down a lot. Fortunately, she was determined and could control herself. The sound of the door opening could be heard from behind her. Zhang Hong came out of the bathroom. His body was half dried and there was still water dripping from the ends of his hair. He felt a cold chill. He frowned at the slender figure on the balcony and pursed his lips. What are you standing there for? Come in. Sun Shuang suddenly turned around and saw a sexy man coming out of the shower. She subconsciously covered her face with her hands, and her eyes could only be seen through the gap between her fingers. She could not help but look at Zhang Hong, who was covered in water droplets. Why aren't you wearing clothes? Zhang Hong looked at her. Although it was clear that she wanted to look at him, she pretended not to peek. He could not help but smile. How did you put on clothes in the shower? The man in front of her smiled slightly. He had a delicate face and a sexy figure. His smile was especially deadly. Sun Shuang felt that her heartbeat was starting to become disobedient again. She did not know how many more times she would be seduced by his beauty. Would she be unable to control herself one day? Zhang Hong's face turned red when he saw Sun Shuang's shy gaze. She kept waving her small hands vigorously at him. Hurry up and put some clothes on. Even though they're the only ones in this room, you can't be naked. And you're not allowed to walk around the room like this. Zhang Hong listened to her. He walked to the wardrobe and grabbed his pajamas. However, he was not in a hurry to put them on. Instead, he smiled and looked straight at Sun Shuang. He said seriously, You've been taking care of me for so long. What part of me have you not seen? Do you have to be so embarrassed? It would have been better if he didn't say that. However, when he did, Sun Shuang wanted to dive into a hole. You're talking nonsense. I didn't see anything at all. I only wiped your body with my eyes closed. She had occasionally seen a tiny bit of him, but she definitely had not seen anything major. Zhang Hong's words really ruined her reputation. He did not seem to have a conscience. Zhang Hong pursed his lips and smiled lightly. There was a hint of joy in his languid voice. His gaze fell on the small face she was desperately trying to keep covered up. If you don't look, that means you simply touched me. Then wouldn't you be even more familiar with my body? Sun Shuang said shyly, Zhang Hong, you old man, you're shameless.